Hey there, my name is Millen Singh and I'm the host of SpyFy After Dark. I'd like to take a moment to thank you for listening to this episode, and to ask that if you enjoy the show, consider rating or subscribing on whatever platform you're listening on. That's all from me. Now on to the episode. Remember, these mics don't record stereo, they only record mono.
Yeah, it's literally just the volume difference.
Yeah,
that's all it is. Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Who did I invite for my co-host?
I ask that to myself every week.
All around. You're like, no.
No. It's not. It's actually just
not.
right in your
I
ear.
know.
Just
Yeah.
right in my one ear.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
My one AirPod.
Yeah. You're listening to the SpyFy After Dark podcast. Welcome back to SpyFy After Dark. I'm here with Hans, or Brett. I know him as Hans. Say hello.
No solo, because I'm here.
Hold on. I'll get to you, Alex. Be patient.
Everyone with the solo jokes.
You're gonna have to get a little closer.
Everyone with the solo jokes.
If you can, try to move it up. It's a little low. I know it kind of will drop a little bit because these are janky arms, but there you go. That's good.
Can't just do this.
Well, you can, but just because you were already there, you just needed to go a little
That wouldn't
higher.
be as funny just on audio.
Yeah. Well. And of course, Alex,
What's up?
who is my new co-host,
Welcome.
except for next week's episode because he wasn't around for that. But you know, that's okay.
Can't always be here.
So, Brett is a coding instructor at a local technical high school.
Mm-hmm.
And he introduced me to a lot of the skills that propelled me along my web development career in the early days. So I figured we probably would talk about the future of technical education and then see where we go from there.
Sounds fun.
Okay. Alex,
So he's the
you
man
wanna-
behind the curtain?
One
I
of the
try to
curtains,
be.
perhaps.
Very cool. What school, by the way?
West-MEC and Central Campus. There's a bunch. It's like
You got to be right into it.
West-MEC is like all of Western Arizona practically.
Yeah.
Like it's massive.
If you're going to turn your head, we got to adjust the mic
Yeah.
for it.
I've never heard of West-MEC.
Yeah, I didn't either, and I'm pretty sure the bot I wrote applied for my job.
Okay.
Okay, then. I have to take you up on that. Currently in the market.
So he's such a programmer, he writes a bot to apply for jobs.
Don't tell LinkedIn. They don't like bots being on there.
Okay.
They tend to sue people who do that. So I
Really?
totally clicked on that apply button. Totally did.
Totally, yep.
Yep, I totally signed into my own profile and did that every day. And the first
100
item,
times a day.
yeah, per minute, yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's awesome.
So what's the curriculum like at West-MEC?
For my year or in general?
We'll say your year, but then in general.
So mine is the second year, so they've already had a full year, and so they've already learned HTML and CSS and a little JavaScript. And so I come in and I teach them full stack JavaScript. So mostly we kind of start off with a review on JavaScript debugging, ES6, which I'm trying to integrate in the future just to be in the year one because it mostly runs in the browser nowadays, most things. And then, what was it? Ajax, Node, and then now we're on, I forgot the exact title, but we're going over Mongo and databases, just a light overview on databases.
Okay. So in English, for those who don't understand any of those words, it's basically the foundational technologies that run websites.
Yeah. So like Ajax is how you communicate with any site. pretty much.
It's one way, yes, the common
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Well, it's how you get data from another place
Without
computer.
reloading the page.
Yep.
So he's teaching web application development. So I'm sure everyone who listens to this uses web applications every day, from Facebook to productivity tools to the very thing you're listening to this podcast on is probably a web app, realistically. Unless you're maybe on the iTunes desktop app or something.
Native apps.
So these are the core pieces of technologies that run most of our lives these days.
Mm-hmm.
And you're teaching at a high school,
Yeah.
technically.
That's very different than teaching adults the same kind of content.
So what are your feelings on boot camps? And for those who don't know, boot camps are basically adult education alternatives to bachelor's degrees. They're supposed to be very short and arm you with the skills you need and none of the skills you don't in order to do a job like programming. And they've had mixed success.
Yeah. I'd put emphasis on mixed for sure. I think that if you're an adult who has no coding experience wanting to go to one, be very cautious and just really do your research. Make sure that they offer some kind of certification. The one I worked at did, for example. They're not perfect, but they're probably definitely one of the better ones, for sure. Because they offer a certification.
That's true.
Through a university, no less.
Yeah, you did work at a boot camp before you worked at high school.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and you applied to that same position, right?
Yeah, similar.
Did they go through the interview process?
Oh, yeah. It's pretty easy, honestly.
Yeah. Yes, it was.
But they only had replacement, like temp openings. I was like,
Okay.
screw that. It's not paying well enough for me to.
Well,
bother.
even if it wasn't a replacement, it's not paying well enough either. It
would have been fine it was supplementary because it was only in
Right.
the evenings. So as a supplementary piece of income, I would have been okay with it.
Yeah, and that's also for the instructors. Were largely when I was there, it was almost. I don't think when I started, I don't think they had any full-time instructors. So I think they do now. In fact, I think they started doing that at the end of when I was a TA.
Okay.
So it was all supplemental for all of the staff.
Okay. I'm going to adjust your mic real quick. We can cut this part out, but.
Oh no.
Since you're looking in that direction, we can do this.
Okay.
That way.
Because it's only straight here.
Yeah.
Like
You have to be
like a laser in front.
Yeah.
My bad.
Okay, that should be a little better. I'm watching your levels on the screen here. Okay, so what was the experience like? Were you teacher or TA there?
TA.
Okay. What was your experience like there?
I mean, it was 3 days, if I remember right. I think I did Tuesday, Thursday, and then Saturday.
Sounds right to me.
For I think like 4 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very different than teaching every day.
Yeah.
2 classes for 2 hours, and teaching, not just being a TA. The biggest difference I think is, being more of a mentor versus a teacher. When you're a TA, it's much more of a one-on-one mentor kind of relationship than it is an instructor position, and that's very different.
Mm-hmm. Alex, do you have anything to add here?
What was was the curriculum just 3 days in total? So 12 hours in total?
It was
3 days a week?
about the same duration as what my students are going through, actually.
It's 3 days a week for 6 months?
How
That
long is
sounds
it?
right.
6 months?
Yeah.
Is that the general structure for boot camps?
More or
That's
less. The
common,
ones
yeah.
that stay, they change for all of them, actually. Some actually, There's some really intense ones where like you live there.
Yeah, it's a full-time thing.
And like you, like they provide room, board.
It's like 6 months, 5 days a week.
It's a little culty. I mean, I'm kidding. I've never gone to those, but like it's super intense, and those are typically actually there's different markets too. So those I feel are often for the larger companies and fill that market. Where the one I was at was more general. Like let's just get people entry level. Not just like, let's just get them hired at Facebook or, insert name brand company. Like Galvanize here locally is very different than how, do you know, are they called Hack Reactor now? I know they bought Hack Reactor.
Galvanize?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
So they're similar, but like you can test out of things. And again, so like they don't accept anyone too. They only accept like the cream of the crop. And so really what they're doing is they're taking developers and they're making them developers.
Maximizing.
Yeah. They're just kind of squeezing, lemons to make lemonade, as opposed to growing a tree.
Right.
Okay. And personally, I think that's a better approach.
The making lemonade kind of thing?
I think that if you have no exposure to coding at all, doing a boot camp is a bad idea. I think you really should be able to learn a little bit on your own and decide if it's even something you want to do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, but at the same time, like, so let's just say, and I don't know much about the space, but let's just say there are boot camps out there, and I'm sure there are, that have a more rigorous weekly structure, maybe 5+ days a week, 2+ hours a day, maybe we'll just say 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, that are truncated curriculums. So you have 3 months of this. Fits right into a student's summer schedule. Students are not in college, maybe breaking into high school. I could see parents pushing their kids to do this just to get their feet wet. It's something
I could see that.
It's something to consider because you're not going to be an avid programmer in high school, most likely, unless you go to a high school that will expose you to that. And then if you play sports, if you're taking work home, if you're like a committed student, it'd be difficult as a parent to also supplement exposure on top of whatever stack your kid's really getting like or having to deal with on a weekly basis. So the summer would be a good time to just see. And I mean, as a parent, I would pay like just to see if my student doesn't.
That's the best part about West-MEC.
Okay,
free.
what if it's well? Let's take your scenario.
You don't have to take a mortgage out.
What if it's $6,000?
Yes and no.
It
depends. I mean, like there are plenty of situations where parents spend money in that realm, higher and lower, if you will, for sports. And sports is a more guaranteed thing to not carry really beyond high school and college.
Okay.
Not to mention the failure rates of sports are, I would assume, honestly, way higher in some ways because there's so many people trying to get in. And the demand isn't as high.
It's a funnel,
in a way.
Versus
I'm getting at more adult-oriented stuff. I mean, yes, if it's
I know I'm agreeing with you.
If someone's making a boot camp for high school students, that's really not a bad idea. Or college students or what have you. It's not a bad idea at all.
I just presented a counterexample to say that like entry or like outreach / like early exposure. Purposed boot camps could be a good idea for like kids, but to your point, the whole like lemonade out of lemon, I totally agree that like you would have people with the intent of maximizing their abilities and already having like exposure and a desire to do so.
My problem,
it's safer. It makes sense.
My problem is the ones that are more than happy to charge $12,000 and promise a job at the end to someone who doesn't have any experience going into it, because that's completely unrealistic.
So that's potentially fraudulent too.
Yeah. Does that happen for like entry level?
Yeah.
A lot of them do get hired. A lot of the adults at the one I was at were hired right out of the bat or even before they graduated.
Okay.
And
But
these
they
are
came
people,
in with some experience.
some minimal, some none actually. Most boot camps have some kind of like pre-assessment, not always as a disqualifier, but just to gauge where they're at individually, right? And like judge their thought process, like a whiteboarding interview almost, right? But I was curious because I don't know you either, Alex. What's your background like too?
So I don't have any real programming exposure.
Aside from my failure to teach you.
Yeah. He and I dabbled with a game that Millen built, and we were just looking at different ways to improve some of the mechanics, kind of like as an activity to get my feet wet. My background's in biomedical engineering.
Okay.
So more on the instrument side. So a little removed from this conversation, but still very interesting. And I've always considered, the idea of learning software development just for my own sake. And my brother does it, and it's a great avenue. I know it's pretty
Let me put it this way. He's told me he wants to learn programming for like 4 years.
Yeah.
Then do it.
I'm awful. I'm awful. I lack the focus. Not discipline, focus. So
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, it's accurate.
And it does take a lot of focus. One thing, so I think in addressing like boot camps, I think you have some valid points, but I think, so the way I look at it is there's just different demands, right? So we have just increasing demand in tech in so many different fields of tech. One of them being programming, another arguably being game design and development. But that typically is, I think, a bit overfilled, and
I don't think there's expanding demand in that realm.
Yeah, it's not expanding.
It's static at best.
That I think is very interesting. Itself really needs a lot of innovation, too, which I might touch back at.
It needs a lot of things. It needs higher salaries to retain better talent. It needs better work-life balance.
Yes, especially that.
It needs customers willing to pay a higher price point for the games because they're too low these days. I mean, I could get into it because it's, a $60 game was a $60 game
in the 90s,
15 years ago.
Yeah. By the way, so I didn't know this, but how many developers do you think make GoldenEye on the N64?
Oh, probably like 20.
So I could be wrong, but I heard recently I think it less than 10, and
I could believe it.
Only one of them had actually worked on a game before.
I could believe it.
Wait, what? A major title? That was probably the first console shooter I played.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a breakthrough, FPS.
Yeah, and it's absolute crap now. I know. I don't even think you can move and aim at the same time. I think you have to pause. But that's incredible if you think about that. Under 10 people with low-level programming too, right? I think it was a lot harder to learn.
Old days where they had to do some real complicated stuff.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, what I'm trying to get at with boot camps is they're marketed in a way we will show you how to do this and how to get a job. But in reality, if you're coming into one with no experience at all, no exposure at all, or very little, you're going to have to do a lot of work outside of their curriculum to really prepare you for the job.
Yes. So on that exact note...
And they're not telling you about that.
So on that exact note, and this was a big shift for me getting used to it as a teacher, is as a TA and stuff, my students, the adult students, there was an expectation, they had homework, and their homework was basically a pre-project for each unit. And the expectation of homework in mine isn't there. And honestly, I do wish it is, because anyone, high schoolers or adults, are kind of goldfish in terms of memory. If you're not practicing something, you're going to forget it, and
you can't design homework?
I can, and it's frowned upon, I'd say.
Okay.
Because, so keep in mind, my students go to their main public high school, and then they come here on top of that.
Oh, this is supplementary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've heard of EVIT locally, we're the equivalents in Glendale on that side of town.
Very cool. My question to you, by the way, just on a random tangent, we can go back. I don't mean to interrupt, but like,
No,
my question to you is: so it sounds like, Millen, your problem with boot camp is that there's a lack of guarantee and the upfront costs it shouldn't be as expensive as it is. What if I told you that there's a boot camp, it's a little longer, and it guarantees a slightly better job, but the cost is not only as much up front, but recurring per year? Usually 4-year structure.
And it's called 4-year university.
4-year structure, no job guarantee. So like,
I have the same problem with college.
Oh, and a bunch of unrelated classes, right?
If the average salary out of I don't know, like a well-received or well-reviewed, or I don't know what you want, like a better 6-month boot camp that offers certifications. If the average salary there, let's just say, I'm just using salaries as like an example. This is just a benchmark. It's like $35K. But the average salary outside of going into University A after 4 years is $65K, right? Which one would you do, assuming you know that software is in your pursuits?
I mean, I would definitely pick university.
You think so?
Yes.
Well,
I
I mean,
don't
he
know.
already has a university background too.
It's also about starting at a higher place. Like you have much more over time because you started higher. In your example, it's in real life. It's not that stark.
Yeah,
So
especially
it's
because
55 versus 65.
Because 3.5 years on top of having industry, like at the 4-year mark, you're at 65 with 0 industry versus 35 plus whatever kind of incremental increase you got. So it's not 35 by the 4-year mark plus 3.5 years of industry experience.
But unless
you're not, I'm just saying it's more of an
really
argument.
good at job hopping and whatnot, your 35 is not going to turn into 65 at the end of 4 years.
I know, but then the trajectory, because you know how it is.
But
so
granted,
now
if you're making 35 as a developer, you've done something terribly wrong.
Exactly. I did that intentionally too. It's not going to be that big of a difference either. So the point I'm trying to make is I think that conversation is still there because like after 3.5 years, even if you suck as a developer,
people forget that college also has a lot of other values that come with it.
I didn't put any value in the actual education. I agree with you.
Do you mean the drinking?
Yes.
Well, I mean the networking, which can include drinking, I guess. But you meet a lot of people, you make friends, and they're going to help you out down the line.
Well,
and you never know how.
Yeah, networking is important.
Not to mention your professors can get you internships while you're in school.
You also find out it's a lot of filtering too. So like,
I'm saying this, and I didn't do any of these things.
Right.
I'm just saying they are available.
And we had this conversation. I did do a lot of these things. Also, it's better to try and get exposed to different things in college and find out what you don't like versus having to. I mean, it's not going to translate one to one.
That's where I would actually disagree.
Talk to me.
Because college should not be the place where you're trying to figure out what you want to do because it's way too expensive.
It's so expensive.
And
I agree with
it's just
that.
increasing.
No, I agree with that. It just ends up being
and that's
that
the
anyway.
biggest problem.
Because really, I don't think it's college. I think it's like that's a general time in your life where I think you're formulating your own identity, independence. You have like the faculties now to do things on your own, et cetera, et cetera. College just happens to be a medium. It doesn't have to look the way college has looked for us. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? It's also that time in our life.
So
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to figure out what you want to do in college.
That's what I'm saying because you're going to do that anyway, probably at that time.
I think there needs to be new policy.
There's a caveat
how
though.
Colleges operate. And I really think a big part of that is just going down to this private university stuff has to be addressed. Our student loan debts have to be addressed.
Well, colleges are more expensive than they should be.
It's not just that, though.
But
so like at NAU, and I don't mean to cut you off.
That's all right.
Like when have you gone to Flagstaff? By the way. Either one of you.
Maybe a couple times in my life.
Yeah, I've been a few times because it just
like
so
recently
happens that
though.
No,
I haven't gone in like 5 years.
It's been longer than that for me.
Yeah, so I graduated in 2013, and it was during my 4 or 5 years of going there at NAU.
You never met a guy named Justin Gross, did you?
Not that I know
Okay,
of.
he graduated in 2013 as well.
Oh, okay.
From NAU.
What major, though?
I always forget that he went to NAU and not
Finance.
ASU.
Oh.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I might have walked past them, though, because I bear in mind, my degree is not in computer science for you. It's in applied sociology. So I was right next to the Frankie School.
Okay.
So I probably could have walked next to him for
Got it.
that whole time.
Very cool.
But no, so like the reason I bring up NAU is it's a perfect example of one of the many ways that education is being done wrong. And it not just in terms of curriculum, that's a whole different topic. What's being done wrong is treating a university, a public university, as a way to make money per bed. It's like a hospital, you know. You look at how many like universities, if they have like X number of freshmen and like a quarter or more drop out the first semester, they should be penalized for that. Not like
I agree.
just take in all that money, because they're doing something wrong and they're putting just more people in debt. And that's a serious issue.
I like that too. Like, so retention rates should
Yeah.
correlate to something.
Yeah, like their performance metrics should actually matter.
But
So-
also, in my opinion, another thing that should matter, and I know that this isn't completely tied to the college's ability to provide, you know, proper education and provide resources that complement said education. But in my opinion, on the other extreme, I think students staying in college and not completing their degree. So I know that's more contentious, but
Yeah.
do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I do think that is something too. It's a little interesting.
I think it's interesting to address that, but
So what
But to
you're,
your po-
what
but to
you're
your
ultimately
point.
getting at is colleges should raise their standards for admission.
it's
which
not
I agree with.
that. I think that we need to really, there needs to be there are so many different areas where I think college education is just wrong. So let's bring it way back to arguably some of the roots, right? Where did it used to be way hundreds of years back, right? It was master and apprentice, right? You worked under someone who was a master in that field, right? And over time you learned, and gradually we had institutions pop up to provide a more formal structure for that. Just very not strictly accurate, right? But just broad. And now it's become it's a for-profit thing, even though it's a public institution. And that's where problems increase in multiple different areas. One is the housing part. And NIU, just to quick summarize, that area of problems is, you know, we also have dorms that are privately owned on federal land. Wait, what? That's weird, right? Because where's the money then going to? Is it going back into our education, to their students? Or is it just
Wait,
going
is
to...
that really a thing?
Yes.
I didn't even know
Like
that.
Res Life?
And
Is that-
it's not just at
Well,
NAU.
I think ASU owns all of its res buildings.
A lot of... You see
Except
this
for,
at a
like,
lot of
Vista,
different
maybe.
colleges, though. So
They
that's...
own
I see it.
Vista.
I mean, I see it actually.
They own
Now,
Vista.
now that you say it, I think they bought Vista eventually.
Yeah, they did. And they bought 922.
They now that you say it, that makes complete sense. I just never realized that.
it's crazy when you do, right?
And I wasn't exposed to it because I did go to ASU and they owned their
And you
own
were in a
buildings.
sociology major.
I wasn't that. Yeah, that's wow. I didn't even.
But then there's also, I think, the curriculum side, especially for highly technical areas. But it's not just technical areas, to be fair. It's going back to like that master apprentice. So like, why are there doctorate degrees in things that are non-medical? Like, okay, are you going to operate on a circuit board?
Yeah.
Are you going to operate on a brain when you're in psychology and not neuropsychology? No. You have a master's and thesis defense. You have a thesis defense for master's and doctorate. Why are you just doing it twice? You already went through that process. Why are you just increasing the amount of money? To be fair, I haven't gone to grad school, right? I took some grad courses, but you know, when I started thinking about that, I was like, this is kind of nuts, you know, because I already have this at my university, and I was lucky. I had really good relationships with my professors, right? I'd like follow them to their next class and bug them and just like pick their brain for all their knowledge, right?
So you actually maximize your time.
Yeah, of course. And like I'd go to bars with them and a lot once I was 21, of course, and we just talk about things and just learn more organically in that mentor-mentee way that I was kind of talking about with as a TA as well, and today I think that you only really often get that kind of experience as a master once you have your master's and you're going for your doctorate. But then, what I'm saying, like master's is now a cliche, right? Because now you're really an apprentice, right? But you have a degree saying you're a master.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean the semantics are there. I mean,
And
I will say
semantics,
there is a hierarchical structure of like understanding a subject matter to a greater degree of granularity, and at the doctoral level, you're supposed to have a very
absolutely.
But I do. It is weird, and it also, and to your point, like I do think whether this is the direction you were trying to go with that argument, I will say that a master's degree has been trivialized. By the way.
Yeah.
It's just like in a lot of different ways.
And by the way, Alex has a master's degree.
So I don't mean to discount your degree.
And it's true. Trust me, I don't care about it. I don't think anybody does.
Well, like I have friends that I went to high school with, right? And so they're teaching in public high school, not CET. So I'm already making more than them as a first year teacher. I'm like, I'm sorry. Because I don't have a master's degree. And I'm making more just because I'm in a CTE school and I'm teaching a technical field. And it's like, this is a shame for our educators that actually want to do this for normal public school too. They're not only just underpaid, but they're overeducated. And then, like, what's the point of the bachelor's? You have to ask that question.
Well, that's what I've said in my life. Is bachelor's degree has basically just been added on to high school, and it's not special anymore because they let too many people in. And it's not just their acceptance criteria is too low. They don't filter out people that aren't actually going to stick with it.
Well, the content is also garbage sometimes. Like you have all these other things that aren't related to your major. So of course they're not going to finish what they put into. If you have to spend all these years in, I don't know, like I took forestry as part of my bachelor's. Like that's of course not related to anything, but I had to do some kind of credit in some kind of category that wasn't related to my field.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of attrition in that sense.
I would say just kind of a couple of really random things. I think your bachelor's is being able to get a certain score on a final. A master's allows you to write the final and an acceptable version of it, and then a doctorate would be to challenge the formal way of writing it.
Okay.
Challenge the very structure of writing in the first place.
Challenge the final.
Okay. So I completely understand that.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I just wanted to take a quick second to ask you to give us a shout out on social media. Every share makes a pretty big difference. And as always, don't forget to rate and or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. Thanks again. Back to the episode.
I could see
the
that.
very structure of writing in the first place.
Challenge the final.
Okay,
It's
so
change the
I
structure of
completely
the
understand
file,
where you're going with that, and
Makes sense.
yeah, I could see that because so like at Ivy League schools, often what you see is as a bachelor's, when you're under your undergrad, going for your undergrad, you don't actually learn from them. You learn from the people who are going for their master's degree, and are the TAs or the what do they call them?
I know people working on the PI, but yes, I know what you're talking about.
And then
yes.
they're learning when they're going for their masters from the people with doctorates, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So what you're saying is it's a pyramid scheme.
I didn't say that at all.
I'll say that.
So one of my professors at NAU, one of my mentors really, he's described as like, as an undergrad, like you learn the basics of a field, right? In my case, sociology. In yours,
Biomedical engineering.
And in yours, web design, right?
More or less.
Well, that was the title, right? That
It's
you're working
graphic
towards?
information technology,
Graphic
but it's like 3
information
different
technology.
things combined. It's a bullshit degree
He's a Git
program.
expert.
Yeah. Yes. I'm a source control expert, even though I don't learn source control at all in that degree program.
That's funny. That's really funny.
Yeah.
Um,
For those who don't understand what I'm talking about, Git is the name for a source control program, which you use as a programmer to keep track of your code and version it so you don't break things. Or when you do, you can easily roll back.
so any game developers listening, try to use it.
Yeah.
It is a standard, right? I'm not familiar, but
It's
I've
a
used it
standard
with you.
for most programming, but for games, there's other constraints
cool.
that make it difficult to use.
Yeah,
sometimes.
like a Word document. Like, okay, so have you made changes on like a Google document?
Yeah.
So and you can track the history of those changes, right?
Right.
So that's source control, really, at the end of the day. But game development and different files aren't fully compatible with Git. So even a Word document isn't,
Yeah.
even though Microsoft bought them.
So the point being, Git allows you to see the changes on a granular level between different versions.
So you changed this sentence in your thesis statement.
Yeah. So it's perfect for programming that relies on basically plain text files, because if you have a piece of JavaScript, it's basically a plain text file.
Oh, it's all plain text files.
Yeah, with an extension. But you can see like exactly what lines were changed and exactly how they were changed. And that way you can like compare differences, fix problems, look back to see when something was changed or why it was changed, so on and so forth. But with game design, you have all these file formats that are not plain text file formats, and they're not compatible with Git. And so there's no way to diff changes between two files, so you end up with conflicts that you can't resolve.
Yeah. So
Makes sense.
And so in that case, there probably needs to be a way to do that, like with 3D the graphic files. So like if you have a low poly model and then you want to, convert it to a high poly model, right? And seeing the changes in between that process there needs to be a way to do that in some way.
And some of the tools these days build their own diff tools. So like Unreal Engine has Blueprints, which is a visual scripting system, and they have a diff tool built into it.
I didn't know they have. I know of the visual scripting, which is very common in game design. Which is funny because like I'm very much against like teaching kids to use Scratch, which to program, but I didn't know they had a diffing tool in that too.
Yeah, and that's obviously proprietary, and I don't know how well it integrates with Git. I know they use Perforce by default. That's their the one they recommend. But anyways, this is very esoteric.
So in gaming, it sounds like source control management is compartmentalized by application.
Somewhat. You have to use different tools.
A different tool, yeah.
You still use source control because you don't not use it.
And the great thing about it is that so before source control was a thing, people would just zip everything up and then just have different zip files for different versions.
Yeah.
And some people still do this.
Yes.
Not just in game design, unfortunately. So the instructor that taught before me did a lot of that too.
Oh, Jesus.
You said it, not me.
I won't get you fired. I promise.
Oh no. That guy did a good job on that on his own.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say on that.
Okay.
Which is why I had my students, like I slacked out before the first day, like, hey, show up in the student, I'll give you extra credit, which is just professionalism points. I just didn't tell them that. To like, and have a talk about like, hey, the people who showed up, you may, if you all have equal coding skills, the people who dressed up today may have actually gotten hired.
True.
The bad part about that was my first hour only had one person.
Only one person did it? Dang.
You can't make the point. But best practices.
Yeah.
Thing,
Just interviewing, soft skills, or I'm sorry, I guess they're called professionalism skills now. whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But my second hour had I think almost half of the students do that.
Nice.
So that was cool.
It's probably realistically, it's probably hard for them to change for the first hour.
Because they're coming from their home. No, actually, they weren't at that time. Their
They're
main
coming
school didn't
straight from
start.
school?
Not then. We start early. We have 11 months, actually.
Okay.
So yeah.
Oh, so you start before the school year starts.
We start before, and I'm not. When does the school year actually end for most
May?
public?
May,
Usually?
early May.
I think we go to June.
Okay.
May,
you
no,
start,
May or June.
Start in July then?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think something like that. We have a month off.
Got it.
So let's circle back to the college discussion.
And by the way, the whole students staying in longer than 4 years, that's coming from a very personal, niche perspective, with engineers requiring more than 4 years and not having a scholarship for their 5th, 6th year kind of thing.
Oh, there's that too.
Yeah. So,
There
I
is
mean,
that.
I've been in longer than 4 years through my own faults.
Same.
yeah,
And I came in with AP credits. So it's even worse.
that's right.
I was a semester ahead, and I graduated a semester behind.
I was a semester and a half ahead, and I still technically haven't graduated, so you can't
you don't count that
I'm
though
like
because you
doing
haven't been
the math.
you haven't been participating.
no, I'm not counting this time, but if I do the math as if I were full time, I would be graduating 2 semesters behind, I think.
Oh wow.
Maybe even 3. But that's my fault. I didn't treat it seriously.
Well, you're working too.
Yeah.
Well, no, this was before that.
He's saying that with that adjustment, you lost 2 years potentially.
Yeah. Some of that was indecision. Some of it was taking some classes that I didn't need to take. I just wanted to
You
take.
also
Was it
made a
maybe the
transition.
curriculum being too broad?
Was it what?
The curriculum being too broad. You said that
Yeah,
your
that
title was
certainly was it.
3 different areas, really.
Yeah, you changed
They
too.
they have taken I changed after 1 semester.
Oh,
And I only realistically lost.
I changed more than that.
I think I only realistically lost 1 class in
that's
that
not
transition.
bad. Small gap.
Maybe 2, 1. But then there was also a couple honors classes like human event. I didn't stick with honors, so those were wasted too.
Well, honors always is.
Yeah,
I agree,
well,
100%.
But yeah, I mean, a big problem for me with the degree was they have broadened the GIT degree in order to have enough students to justify its existence. It doesn't focus on one particular area. And I mean, we got down to it, by the time I actually got to the 400 level web design, web development classes, front-end development classes, they're teaching JavaScript and some jQuery, and just basic stuff, no package managers,
Oh God.
none of the tools that you actually use, just the basic
packet
language
managers
itself.
in this day and age are essential, not just because of ES6 and everything, but just because most software does some kind of packet manager or compiling.
Yeah, and it relies on other packages to build your product. But anyways, once I got to those classes, I was generally more knowledgeable than my professor at that point.
I'm not surprised. I'm not at all surprised.
But that said, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, to really circle it back, for students to figure out a little bit of who they are and what they want to do in their first year in college, because of the way it's set up that you have to take a lot of gen ed credits anyway.
But should that be on their dime, or worse, their parents?
No, I mean, it should have been taught to them in high school, ideally.
Exactly.
It's
But-
also difficult though because I am going to present something else. So
We got to work with what we got.
yeah, forgive me because this is going to come off potentially very ignorant, but I would imagine that we live in a day and age now, and this is becoming incrementally more of a problem and a benefit or a privilege, where we have the opportunity to explore so many things, and we have so much
Yes.
exposure at a young age. There was so much
The problem, by the way,
there were so many subject matters that were unknown to me, but I had at least the nominal information of what they were to consider pursuing them, and the fear of missing out. So the opportunity cost seemed greater with the decision at 17, 18 years old versus saying, oh, I'm 18, I should go to college. My dad did this. He did all right. My grandfather did this. He did all right. That was like a traditionalist justification for going to college before. That's not a thing anymore.
It's fair to say that the choice of deciding what you want to do is exponentially more complicated today. And so that's another reason why it's hard to even imagine someone making that decision in high school.
And that won't be resolved within a year or two.
Let me ask you guys
It
this.
won't be.
So
not fully anyway.
Not fully. Sorry.
When people pay for college, let me ask you this. Are they really paying for the education or the social experience?
I think
you're paying for both, but primarily the latter.
No. If you only had to pick one.
You're consciously okay. I think the average student is consciously okay with paying for the education with the uncertainty of getting the return
in order to get the social experience.
And I think the byproduct that no student is guilty of wanting to have would be the social experience. So I think it's a second order. I do think education is still the first order. I could be wrong. I think it's very irresponsible for a student who doesn't pay for his or her like education and conditions and or living situation to like want to go just for the social experience.
But it does happen.
It does happen, but I don't think
it happens quite a bit.
The reason I asked the question as I did,
a lot of people go to college because their friends are going to college.
Yes. So
that's a good point.
So the reason I asked the question, how I asked it, was because I think that through media, the expectations of college have shifted. You know, like it's not just an educational environment. In fact, it's primarily a social environment nowadays. And this is probably in some way, not all of it, but in one way, the problem with higher education. You know, what was that movie? Not American Pie, the other one, Vanderpump
Rules or something?
Yeah, like that kind of
Van Wilder?
Yeah, Van Wilder. Those kind of like fun movies to watch, but like before that, how much do you see like colleges as just a environment to be social, to party, to mess around with, as opposed to being, hey, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to not just learn something, but what I'm learning is preparing me for a career, right?
Okay, so let me double down then on this. Should we accept what has become the status quo and reinvest in it, or should we try to change it? And what I mean by that is college has effectively become an extension of high school for a lot of people. There are pros and cons to that. I think, to Alex's point previously, it's pretty fair to expect people to take longer to actually figure out what they want to do in life these days.
Yep.
Because there are so many options available, and you really need a lot of time to try a lot of different things. And I think there is a very reasonable argument to be made that investing in that in our young people will produce a more resilient, stronger generation that's more well-rounded in the best ways, and then ultimately makes a decision that's best for them and pursues it. I think there's a very reasonable argument to make that that's actually really good for society.
How many... Sorry, I'm another tangent, but a couple of questions I'm going to ask. You know, we don't have to like answer them.
Oh, so I ask a question, you just do a tangent?
Sorry, but it's on. No, it's on. Yeah.
Tangent.
I'm sorry. It's on this subject. It's just a little on a tangent. So, I'm wondering how many students are satisfied with the college they're attending their freshman year.
Do you mean satisfied with their education?
No,
or their...
they don't even know it, right?
All right, that's a justified tangent.
Okay, here's why. Because I do think that part of like the college selection would be the intent to go to college. So it's like, are you picking a college that's convenient? Are you picking a college that's local? Are you picking something to justify you living on your own away from your parents? Do you actually have any stock in the curriculum you're pursuing and have enough research to back your decision to choose a specific college? I will say that like based off of who I've talked to, I talked to a lot of students because we went to ASU. You know, ASU is a huge campus. Like 99.9% of people said they were in college for jobs, not for the specific.
But you were in engineering.
Because it was considered a safe staple to earn.
I know. I'm just saying that that percentage is going to be higher.
No.
I mean, because of where you were at.
I will disagree with you and then immediately agree with you. My sample size did not constitute generally engineers, but Barrett students.
Did you write it down?
Okay,
did you write it down, each response and all that?
No, but I do have
that was kind of my whole degree.
I have pride in
survey methods and everything is kind of
my methods are questionable, but at the end of the day, I don't question everything I do. I will say that it's anecdotal. I will say that I wouldn't be surprised if the average student
was satisfied
or just went to college because they thought that's how you get a decent job. That's it. There's no dimension
I think
to
that's
it.
fair. I think that society is still teaches all of us that we should go to college to get a job. And so I'm going to cycle this back to CTE. So CTE stands for Career and Technical Education, right? So it's not just coding that West-MEC or EVIT or these other CTED schools do. They also do things like teaching people to be auto mechanics. Trades often is where it kind of starts from. Actually, I didn't know this until I was hired at all. CTE goes way back, like Depression era, like really, it has a long history actually. And I'm not going to go, I just had an overview on that, and so I don't know it very well, so I'll move away from that, just letting people know that, it has a really rich history. And so we have IT as a different program too, right? We have, so that's more servers, networking kind of stuff. They don't code. Then we also have avionics, and so the electronics of aviation equipment and all that. And then we actually have aviation where maintenance, where they actually repair planes. You saw those, you went through the whole hangar of all those cool planes, right? The machines were probably running too, right?
I don't remember.
I think they might have, but and it depends on the day. I don't go there.
It wasn't super noisy.
It can be.
Okay.
And then they have welding. They have precision machining, and even law enforcement too. That one's interesting because they can't go into law enforcement as an officer until they're 21. So it's more about certifications for, I don't know, security guards or other things, right?
Interesting. Bouncers.
Legitimately, yeah. And then and precision machining is, using mills, using a CNC machine, programming it too with G code, learning how to do 3D design for 3D printing. So these are really, really all cool technical things. And these are high schoolers learning all this stuff, which is awesome. It's also cool because I have a background in a lot of these different areas because I can weld. I can do blowtorch. I can use TIG welding. I can do arc welding.
I did not know that about you.
Well, I sold art too in college. Starting off with small wire sculptures and larger pieces, welding them all together.
That's awesome.
Just networking, like you guys were saying. Some people and sometimes they want to clear your bedroom. It would give you money for it.
Yeah.
I worked out of a co-working space out of Gangplank, if you heard of them.
I've heard of
right next to Peugeot.
Huh?
In Chandler?
Yeah. From that one, actually. Yeah. For a while. And it's so different now. And I'm not going to go into that because that's a huge story. But I learned a little about 3D design there and some stuff like that. I'm awful at it. I learned not to pursue that and do web design instead. And then I know a good amount of plane stuff too.
Okay.
But it's nice. The point on CTED is I think that should be the area in an ideal world, right? And that's ideal worlds never exist. But in an ideal world, everyone should have the opportunity like to explore what they want to do for a career. Like you were saying, Alex, in the first year of college, but that should be done in high school. You know, that shouldn't be done at our parents' time. That shouldn't be done at our taxpayer dime for higher education, which is just throwing it all down the drain for these, you know, public/private housing weird things. You know, I think CTE solves so many different solutions. It's not the ending point, right? But I think it's a good starting point. And what's really interesting that about CTE also is that it's not just for high schoolers. So we do have adult programs too. So think about that too. And it's not just some boring curriculum with, you know, useless electives and all this, right? It's they do pay. The adults are paid. It's not 100% free like for the high schoolers.
Yeah.
But it's way cheaper than. It might be the same as community college, or it's comparable. Maybe in some cases cheaper.
Well, and community college just illustrates the fact that university does not deserve to be as expensive as it is.
Yes.
Community colleges can operate oftentimes pretty high quality education programs.
Absolutely.
Debatably better too. Because
And in some
because of
cases
intimacy.
better. I've heard
I
that
agree.
particularly in Maricopa, the community colleges generally have better professors and better quality education
I wouldn't be surprised about
than
that.
ASU and U of A.
One thing that I would be really curious about in terms of addressing curriculum, especially from technical standpoints, like for coding or for graphic design, even precision machining, that kind of stuff, is how does the curriculum development process differ from a university to a community college to somewhere like at West-MEC, where it's pretty open actually. There's a process that we have to go through and scope a sequence, and we have to vet it through industry people on our advisory councils and this and that. It has to meet state standards and all that, but that's all. I don't know. It's not as hard as it might sound.
Do we vet anything through industry? Industry standards / consultation. I'd be surprised if the biomedical school at ASU did anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have
Like
to. I'm sure
nobody
there
got a
has
job
to be.
after college.
Oh God!
Yeah.
Why does that program exist? It's like having a degree called and it just says YouTuber on it.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, actually, that would be an interesting if colleges had to hire consultants to do industry verification of
To
their
be honest,
curriculum.
for some reason, I thought that was the case because, like, I didn't have this education.
It definitely should be.
And
the
in high
case.
school, someone had told
Yeah.
me something about Intel being like very, very intimate with ASU,
Well, what-
and so I thought that was like a common thing across the board.
What often happens is companies partner with universities for hiring purposes,
Just
Right.
for
But-
hiring purposes,
but that doesn't necessarily, extend a curriculum.
it doesn't
even though it
distill into
probably
curriculum
should
development.
be,
I would think so
because they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot.
if they're invested in the hiring, yes.
And if they're invested in hiring without any of the
So,
stuff before,
yeah.
yes.
I
now
forget-
it's just unnecessary risk.
I
Yeah.
forget
For the-
which company or which Ivy League school, but one of the Ivy League schools, they teach. Have you heard of OCaml?
Oh, Camel.
I've never used it. It's a programming language, and it's a proprietary one by a company. And I know they partner with the university, and they teach curriculum around that too.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's Stanford. It might be.
I could see it.
It might be MIT though. I think it's an East Coast Ivy League though.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure it happens because I'm sure there are industry partnerships to like place an employee as a professor temporarily sometimes. I'm sure that
Yeah.
happens.
But like in that case, like it's a feeding school to corporate, which
Yeah.
isn't necessarily a bad thing.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think what's interesting is how do you balance the technical, straight to corporate, prepare for job
Mm-hmm.
type setting with I want to develop myself as a person, learn more about the world, become a better educated citizen, not necessarily for a job, but for the betterment of myself and ultimately for society as a whole. Because right now, college kind of has to do both of those things.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reasonable argument to make that those should be separated.
Yeah, I feel like it's feeling at both. Like I've learned more about my responsibilities as a citizen in a corporate setting, and I have tons of gripes about corporate America. Isn't that weird?
Well, but I mean,
no, but you don't.
You're right. Absolutely
I've had a lot
right.
of individual growth,
But I mean in the sense of like,
no, I understand balancing.
trying different things, rounding yourself out a little bit, learning about history.
It's a lot of theory,
culture.
Theory, history, and versus just.
I think that stuff is generally undervalued in society.
Right.
Unfortunately,
I think universities are great mediums for cultivating professors.
No, that's
dude.
an excellent description, and I think you nailed it in so many ways.
It's a pyramid scheme, then, huh?
Yeah, I think it's multi-level marketing.
Okay.
I wouldn't go that far.
I'm kidding.
But
what about
I
single
think that,
level marketing?
I think that he's right in that, and so this is why I didn't go. So I took grad courses as an undergrad. I didn't go to grad school because I immediately noticed that, like, there are some people that just their whole degrees revolve around, like, okay, if you're a psychologist, right? You all have heard of Freud, right? Like most people, even non-psychology majors have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but like he's been largely discredited as a psychologist.
Yeah.
But then there are still professors whose entire subject matter expertness revolves around Freudian theory. Wait, hold on. So how are you relevant as a professor now? Not as a mean thing to ask, but as
just a realistic thing to ask.
Right. Like, so why aren't you? And rather than getting offended on that,
and 2% of people coming out of that will take the X amount of weeks of diving into Freudian concepts as a very, very practical cornerstone of assessing the evolution of the science of psychology and using that as motivation to further investigate psychology because that becomes their passion.
And that's excellent.
But the other 98% waste RAM space.
I mean, so like I took psychology and sociology and I didn't know which one I was going to switch. I was originally a history major. And so I bring that up is because like I'd go into forget which order. I think it was like I went to Psych 101 and the first part of it, because there were two teachers in it. And the first teacher was like, oh, Freud was a genius. Piaget was a genius, blah, 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 right? And I go into my sociology class of 101 and they'd be like, no, they were dumbass. No, they were bipolar. And they're just a lot more critical about it. And I was like, and they tell you why too, right? And so this is still kind of valid. We still use this like, the id, the ego, superego, these are great metaphors, right? But they're not great ways to, you don't want all of your therapy around, all types of therapy on this. You don't want group therapy. You don't want this. It's like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, you might like Mirror's Edge.
I haven't played that.
I haven't either. But just to trigger Millen,
it's just for me.
This is what I do as a video game, right? And you love the world, you love the.
Did you hate that game?
No, I love it.
He loves it.
That's
I think
my
it's his favorite
game.
Yeah. So you love the overall design, theory behind design, proof of concept, etc.
That's a dice game.
Very, very few people would actually.
Back when dice was good.
Rolling the dice.
Rolling the dice.
Wow.
Very few people, I think, would actually see very few people would actually love the game more or go from being indifferent about the game to loving the game if you had those people play a series of games that ended up being pieces of inspiration for Mirror's Edge.
I see where you're going.
Versus if you have the package, you like Mirror's Edge, and you become like, or not even, Mirror's Edge is not even a good example. Any MOBA, any like incredibly technical game with a competitive space, you can become highly technical and competent in that space without the history. And the history might actually give you no return. That's my problem.
I think it's not a perfect analogy.
It's not perfect.
I don't know.
It's not
Mirror's
perfect.
Edge, so I'm
No,
kinda
it's
lost.
not. It's not perfect.
Well, he's saying games in general. You take any game, and you break it down to the history of the games that innovated the various things that led to this game you're playing now.
Okay, yeah.
He's saying knowing the history of that doesn't really help you in terms of being really good at the game that exists today.
No, not even help you. It can help you. It can get you from being indifferent or just liking the game to loving it. But I think for the vast majority of people, it won't do much for you.
Well, there is a term in education called spiral learning, which actually is that.
Okay. I think when it comes to education, it's not quite as stark as a competitive game, if you will. Mirror's Edge is not a good example for a competitive game. But
I'm also bringing this up because I'm
competitive?
trying to tie this to industry influence and consultation and restructuring of curriculums in a technical space. So you say these are the concepts that are relevant to the science of now and immediate application. How can you tailor, a 4-year program or whatever, if you will, like to ensure that these students not only come out of college not regretting their degree, loving the space that they're in, being armed for a job, but not feeling like they also missed out on something, being maybe the theory and if it's relevant, like, or maybe there's some additional body or space of education that like is that like, oh, it's not just about Mirror's Edge, it's everything that went into it. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to investigate that in my head right now. I'm going back to the whole like industry influence, getting these people like ready for the world in 4 years. What could we like? What fat could we cut out, and is it actually fat? Do you know what I mean?
I think there's a lot. In my experience in college, you could teach most of the classes I took in about half to a quarter of the time it took to teach them. In my experience. Now, it wouldn't. If you did that, it would no longer
How much would you remember though?
Whatever I needed to remember. I think if you speed it up, you condense it, you actually keep stuff longer because you don't have to remember it over a longer period of time. You remember it over a shorter period.
What about retention rates?
Is not just retention, but the difference between, at that point, you're dealing with the difference potentially between knowledge and information.
Okay. I'm just saying this is my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think my degree is a very representative degree necessarily, particularly when it comes to technical degrees, because I'm in the engineering school, but it's not a deep degree. It's a wide degree. And I think that hurts it for its purpose because it doesn't have a purpose.
Same here.
But
biomedical.
Yeah, biomedical has the same issue.
Yep.
Versus like an electrical engineering degree is very honed in.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's, again, I think the key question is how do you balance the wanting to have people who are well-rounded for the sake of themselves and wanting people to be able to pursue something and pursue it deeply and gain knowledge in it.
So I think that's an excellent point. And so I was talking to someone on my advisory council at West-MEC. And he was talking about how so there's 3 new instructors. I am one of those. So the last 2 teachers on my campus are not there. One was fired. One just is still with us, just not as a teacher. He's doing professional development. So he just moved to a different area, right? And so me and my coworker, Mr. Peck, he does year 1, I do year 2. And then on top of that, they expanded to a different campus where they're doing year 1 with, a new instructor. And so in talking to someone on my advisory council, he was like, I think there's a bit of an identity crisis that's going on, not just for that, but for other reasons. And we were talking about this for, say, like an hour. And one of the things I was kind of talking about was like, so what do you do? What we need to address, like, for our next advisory council meeting, what is going to be the outcome, and where do we want our students, what do we want them to achieve, because our program, most programs at West-MEC are more like career driven, as in that they go more into the field proportionally. We have over 90% that either go to college or directly get a job, by the way, which is really amazing.
Yes.
That's all across all programs. But again, that considering who's coming here, people who typically have either dual credit or coming here for dual credit as well, right? Or for technical education. But then the question we were talking about is like, so are we training specialists or generalists? And to what degree on either end?
Yeah, it's I think that's basically the same question.
I agree.
It is specialty. Depending on the field, specialty will have its own industry-related advantages for students that just graduate and come out of college.
And neither are bad, but they both have their own advantages.
Yes. Generalism will definitely be distilled to one's ability to learn. This is going to sound crazy, but I do believe that a general curriculum will be the value of a general curriculum will be more tied, this is just my opinion, to a recent graduate's overall GPA versus specialty. And then I also think that a general curriculum will be more easily transferable and less gated by gaps for further education. So like it'd be cool in a perfect world to say, okay, I'm going to do biomedical engineering or whatever. And like some of the students,
what is that?
Exactly. Some students end up saying, I'm going to take this route for their undergrad. And it's like route A, and it's more linear. And it's because Gore, Medtronic, Stryker all bid in on this structure. And it's like cut out for like the instrumentation side. And then if you want like a more general biomedical engineering, you could do that. It's a little less flexible. It encompasses at least 80% of that and more, and there's more theory behind it. It's more general. It has its own purpose in that if you wanted to go to grad school, maybe there's like a comprehensive or like an comprehensive test that gates that at the school, and it's literally tied to the college itself. It's like, okay, I want to pursue a master's in biomedical engineering at ASU. I have to take a specific class or a specific test and score a minimum score to actually be accepted by the college. And the general route would prep you better for that test, but it would make you potentially not look as appealing on paper as students who took the specific, less general route. I'm not even advocating this. I'm just trying to think of like an example of like how this would all be parsed out. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like you just have different classes.
Of course, this isn't feasible. Like I'm literally telling a school to like dilute itself and like break out its resources to another degree. There's no way. But I'm just saying, like, hypothetically, that'd be cool if that was possible, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I think to build on what we were saying earlier, how much of this is even possible to do in high school?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because I think we can all agree that high school should be doing some of this, but how much can we even realistically fit? Because you already have to do a lot in high school.
Resources plus we have to recognize the burden.
It's not just resources. I mean, yes, there's going to be a plus minus. If you add, you got to remove something from high school because it's already pretty full.
I'm also saying though that this puts the burden on the students, you know, it's on the parents, because I will say that, like, you know, at least for me, early in college, like I didn't take my path as seriously, right? In high school, I feel like opting out of incorporating something like EVIT or, these additional resources into like my schedule would be easily done.
See,
Do you know what I'm saying? If I'm 15, I'd be like, you know what? I could get this exposure, but I really don't know what it's going to mean in 7 years. I'm just going to go play basketball. Like, I could see a lot of that happen.
Exactly. You're talking
I'm
about
agreeing
kids,
with you.
right?
I know. I'm agreeing with you. I'm just trying to like articulate it.
so
but,
I have a question too. And this goes back to not just the generalist versus specialist, but way back when we started about education kind of like failing, right? And like providing opportunities. So my question for both of you is, I think I might have two. So let's start with the first one is, do you think that culturally that the message for, okay, we probably all agree that the message that we're told culturally and taught culturally is that you should go to college to get a job, right? So
Yes, that's certainly the cultural
so
message.
that's the expectation, right? Now, my first question is, the real question, I guess, right, is, how should I think? Do you think that implicitly that message is saying you go to college to specialize in something that helps you get in a job?
I think so. I think it highly depends on the family you're talking about, but I think
If they're wanting their kids to go to doctor,
it should be more common knowledge than what it is. It's like it's common knowledge, but it's not universal knowledge.
I think the best way to put it is that's the intent,
yes.
except that parents don't necessarily know that if your kid does history, it's
The lack
not
of
going to
the
lead
lack
to
of
it.
efficacy in whatever percentage of curriculum is available. The fact that, like, to your point, it's like I don't think parents know just how screwed their student is if he or
Exactly.
their kid is if he or she pursues
There's a
this.
false equivalency between a history degree and a computer science degree among parents.
And
it's what I'm getting at.
And it's a number of
So
of
like
things.
their intent is exactly what you're saying. I want my child to go here so they can get a good
job.
education to get a good job. That's what they want. They just don't realize that the good education that gets a good job is only the specific pieces of university and not all of it.
do you think universities today, in bringing this back to, bachelor's, master's, doctorate kind of talk that we were having, do you think universities today are trying overall across different areas to provide students a specialized education?
No.
Definitely not.
No.
So then are they lying
I
to
don't-
all their parents?
Yes, I think
Yes.
as long as the presidents of colleges are making 7-figure salaries, they will continue to
Are they
say
really?
whatever they have to say in order to get more students to go to their school. Which
Again,
I say
universities
this-
are cultivating potential professors.
yes,
again,
it's
Who
well,
write books that
beyond
students have to
it's
pay hundreds and sometimes thousands for?
the
Drop the mic.
I think one of the big things with college right now is there's a prestige war going on
Yes.
because too many people go to college that aren't ready, and too many people graduate because the standards aren't high enough. So a bachelor's degree is not by itself special anymore. And so colleges feel that they have to make their degree special somehow. In order to do that, they chase prestige. Prestige being high quality teachers, high quality cultural events, high quality sporting teams, which ultimately do increase the value of your degree, believe it or not, because you have more alumni,
Outreach.
more networking.
So my degree
so
is
on and so
useless
forth.
because the Lumberjacks cannot play a game.
Well, they're just not helping you out.
Like if your
And then-
if your
and
school
then
is like
expensive
I mean, if we had
professors,
competitive tree
expensive-
chopping, I think forestry might do a good job. I don't know.
Yeah, expensive research departments,
right.
High profile developments, they're chasing that.
Yeah.
And that's in my opinion, that's the main thing that's driven costs up, is you have schools chasing
Development.
these various prestige items that are all expensive.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as cheap prestige in this world. It doesn't happen because they don't build prestige on a quality education anymore for some reason.
Unless you have the eminence. So I don't think an Ivy League university needs to participate in the chase.
But they still do.
No, I think they do actually, because let's take computer programming. So Ivy League schools are still equally failing their students to provide them education. So they might do a good job on prepping people to learn OCAM or something that they have a company partner with, right? They might do a good job getting them hired because they have the prestige already, the historical prestige that'll never go away. They see the Harvard application on the resume and they're more inclined to call that person, right? Unfortunately. But then when you look at the curriculum, it's just, I've seen, honestly, I think, this is my bias, I think West-MEC has better curriculum than Stanford in some ways, just because, but it goes back to but we're more web generalist, whereas they are more computer science.
They have
specialized,
more of the higher end
and low level programming, and they do it really well. And they're better at that for sure. And
so, what I'm getting at here is, for some reason, colleges are chasing prestige as a means of making their degrees more valuable and therefore making their graduates more valuable instead of pursuing a higher quality education, because it's hard. It's harder to prove that. It's a long-term play. And I think that ties into a larger societal problem of people just chase short-term stuff.
Oh, part of it. Another part of college, though, is that another part of college that the quality of education is also put on the student. And so if you can sport a higher education, or you can chase high profile and attract
higher quality,
more ambitious students.
That's a good point.
That then drive your school.
Yeah. That's a good point. There's definitely a correlative factor.
ASU did that with Barrett. It was just to bring Barrett doesn't mean anything, but they brought all of these merit students with the opening, and then they advertised that the same year. I'm not saying merit students are special, but I'm saying I'm sure there's some kind of correlation
above average,
there. Yes. So
that's a good point.
I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just saying, hey, it's a good point. It's out there. So
personally, I'm not as aware of that.
Personally, I think that a lot of this comes down to the administration makes too much money and they are too personally invested in this one way or another.
That's fair.
And that I think some of the expectations put on them are around prestige. And especially with alumni fundraising, it's easier to raise money from alumni if your school is really awesome. If it has all these really cool things going on, it's easier for them to justify donating to that.
To get engagement.
Because it's marketing. And then that money goes back into the programs. It goes back into prestige. And meanwhile, the administration is making an absurd amount of money along the way. Not just the president, but all the deans, all the heads of marketing departments, that whole section of college. It used to be the ratio of administrators to educators has radically changed in college over the last 20 to 30 years.
I didn't think about that.
I didn't know that.
It used to be, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that it's insane, the difference. I think it went from I need to look it up, but I think it went from 4-to-1 educators to administrators to 1-to-1.
I was gonna say 1-to-1 is a joke. I don't believe that, by the way. There's no way.
I'm gonna Google it real quick.
Okay. Yeah. There is no way. That's a joke. I was gonna say that just to be funny. There's no way.
Okay, let's see.
Let me ask you this as he's Googling it. What do you think of professors or any teachers that write books, right, and publish them and assign that to their students?
It should be required for the books to be free for the students.
I would say the same thing. Free 99.
Is it?
I don't think so, and I believe I've been in that situation at ASU once. I think so. And no, I don't believe it was free.
How much?
I think 110.
So you paid thousands of dollars for that course and another 110
Yeah.
directly towards that.
I had
Were they a good teacher?
Uh,
I can see your face on this. They can't,
Like,
but
yeah. Not $110 worth of. Yeah,
it's not a book you would have bought for, some light Sunday reading.
exactly. Plus, like, I didn't take, what I had to distill out of that book with me beyond the class.
Do you still have that $110 book?
Exactly. No.
See, I have a lot of my textbooks.
That's
still,
awesome.
And I still read them. They're like my Bibles.
I'm reading through an article to see if I can find a figure here. But I have experienced that a few times with professors that sell
I
their own
forget
book.
if I did. I
happened-
might have had it once.
It happened for me at least once for a biomedical class. I don't remember if it happened more than once.
Yeah. And I think the one, if I did, I think I did have it free, but I don't remember. Not a lot of my teachers wrote books, but I did like read their thesis papers too, because I was really involved with my teachers, in college.
You guys are gonna have to keep filling time. I'm still reading.
Well, to be honest, I think that's very, very smart of you to do that. I think you're maximizing what you get out of the college experience while also just keeping your opportunities.
Well, it also
up.
scared me out of grad school because one of my favorite teachers' thesis was like 100-something pages.
Yeah.
Like, my God,
Right.
I have to do that.
Some of the dissertations I saw too were like ridiculous.
Books.
Here's a figure. The ratio of non-academic employees to faculty is now 2 non-academic employees at public universities and 2.5 at private universities for every 1 full-time tenure track member of the faculty.
So it's higher than Alex was saying.
That's just full-time though. I mean, there's also part-time faculty, but that should just give you an idea.
Wait, how are they wording it again? Because I think I can understand this.
Okay. Non-academic employees.
Which includes people like the people who tell you like what field they think you should go into.
Like advisors.
Yeah.
Yes, includes those.
Which is a good job.
To every full-time tenure track member of the faculty.
Tenure or tenure?
Tenure. Well,
Okay.
full-time. Basically every full-time professor.
Yeah.
What about the courses that are taught by non-tenure, like postdoc students? and
I'm
stuff?
looking for that figure in here too. That the proportion of non-tenure educators has gone up over time. It did mention that. It didn't give me an exact number, or I think it was a 2-to-1 ratio of non-tenure to tenured or something like that.
That makes sense. That would make sense.
I could see that.
So, I mean, even if we just took that, if we said a 2-to-1 ratio of non-tenured to tenured, so that would be a 2-to-3 ratio of non-academic to academic employees.
That's close.
That's rough math. Something like that.
Yeah, but running it, I don't think that hints to a problem necessarily, because like that also includes all of the food workers, which are students often.
I'm not sure if they're including that or not.
Yeah.
They could potentially. It depends how they break it down, right?
But it shouldn't be even close to that.
I don't know. Like, think about walking through campus at ASU, or even for me at NAU, and in all the common buildings, all the employees. Like, I could see that, and I could see how that could be essential for day-to-day operation. You have police, you have like literally on campus police.
He's right. Like if we're talking like non-administrative, well, even you know what? You're right. I mean,
because it's not necessarily administrative; it's just non-educational.
like your library.
Yeah,
Plenty of libraries on campus, right? Markets.
plenty of people working at the libraries. All the food sessions, all
Right.
the, I don't know, the bowling alley.
Right.
Any
Any lounging area, like a computing common, they call it, or something.
Not even that.
But the
people that manage the dorms.
The number of employees at those places are not necessarily that high. Some of them are.
True.
Like kitchens, obviously. Would
I know,
be high,
but lecture rooms aren't going to have many
near
professors.
as many requirements.
Yeah, because you could have one required professor up to 300 plus students, even
which
more.
is insane.
Yeah,
they
it's
should
awful.
absolutely have like at least 4 TAs for something that big.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest.
Yeah, break that out into quadrants.
Yeah, exactly. Like at least.
Yeah.
That's still insane. Like that's
Okay.
100.
Here's another figure.
Almost.
The number of employees in central system offices has increased 6-fold since 87.
One more time?
The number of employees in central system offices has increased 6-fold since 87.
Okay. So that I think is more alarming to your point.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at. And the number of administrators in them by a factor of more than 34.
Yeah, so
Yeah, like that's it's
just faceplant.
Yeah,
just,
let's see. They give an
Wow.
example. The
34
central office
times.
The central office of the California State University system now has a budget bigger than those of 3 of the system's 23 campuses. So just the office has a bigger budget than 3 of their campuses.
Wow.
That's a problem.
That's
Yeah.
nuts. So that's
Budget
personally
or staff too?
budget.
So that's a fair question though too.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, staff is certainly correlated to it.
Staff density.
But
Because
I'll
if you
bet-
have a bunch of like campus administrators that are like helping the campus admins do their job, that's different too.
Well, I also think it's likely that a lot of these administrators make better money than the educators. Certainly the part-time educators.
That's what I was extracting from this. But
Yeah.
maybe that's not the case. I don't know. It's kind of hard.
It's both.
It's just a statement.
It's a massive increase in bodies, but I think they're also more expensive bodies. And so, in my opinion, this is
They're expensive bodies.
Yeah,
They're not people.
Yeah. I think this is administrators aren't people. What are you talking about? I think this is the primary reason the cost of college has risen so much.
I could see that.
It's this chasing prestige war, which
think
requires this huge central office, huge administration to coordinate all these different projects, all this marketing, all these new building
All the development of
constructions.
housing.
Yeah, all of it. You have to coordinate all this stuff, and that requires a big central office. Personally, I think that's where the cost has gone up, primarily.
So I think
Because it's not in the education.
let's
Class
break it
sizes
down
are
by
bigger
all
than
the
ever,
fields, right?
and they're paying more and more part-time faculty instead of full-time faculty, which are cheaper.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like increase the budget by increasing the budget so we can manage
So
the
we
budget
can
that
lower
we
the
intend
budget.
to increase
yeah.
so that we can
We have
can
too
then
much budget.
also
We need to hire people
And
to
then-
manage
Yeah,
this.
and
that's,
then
that's,
also-
that's exactly what I'm
and then also we need to cut costs, so we're going to do that at the education part of the budget.
Our students don't need that.
The final service that you're supposed to be delivering to your customers.
Your students don't need
aka your
Arduinos.
students. Yeah. So, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is the primary reason it's gone up for sure.
I could see that. I still
Definitely a
think
big
it's
reason.
multifaceted. I can see the procedure area. I can see the admin area, and how that
Well, like,
relates
what
to
else
the
is it
other
gonna be?
areas, right? Well, like the housing, but not only that. Like, let's think. Is it ASU that they require either all freshmen or all students to have a meal card? Because think
No.
about that. That's its own issue. Because
there is
they had some
they do require all first year students to live on campus, but you can get an exemption, and it's not that hard to get.
within 15-mile radius you could like opt out or something. There was some kind of like there was an easy requirement for that exemption. I
Yeah,
think.
no, it's easy to be exempt.
Like I did it.
Yeah,
But
But
the meal card thing, that's a different area because it means like all the companies that have their shops on campus, they kind of have an interest in that, don't they? You know, like
well, but I'm
like
talking
they
about.
kind of profit from that.
I'm just talking about the raise in tuition, not so much in the supplementary services.
Yeah.
Like, how else can you explain the rise of tuition? right? Especially when the
Yeah.
rise of tuition is not just in public schools. A lot of people say it's because funding's being cut for public schools. Like, yes, it has in certain areas, but the cost of tuition has gone up at every school, not just public schools, by similar factors. Public schools have gone up, but also private schools, nonprofit schools, those Ivy Leagues are far more expensive today than they used to be.
All this too.
I think that just adds fuel to the fire, personally.
Because this is the next debt bubble.
Yeah. Well, I hold the position,
you can't
and
declare bankruptcy.
This is very antithetical to my left-leaning stature, if you will. But I hold the position that I think student loans, like a lot of conservatives have said, have encouraged schools to expand their budgets to use up the money that's available to them through government-backed loans. 100% I agree with that. And unfortunately, it's kind of a catch-22. Like, if you cut those loan availabilities now, you'd hurt people hard because it's expensive. But if you give in and keep raising it, then the costs are just going to go up, and that's not sustainable. So, like, at some point, you have to draw a line in the sand and say, we're not going to go higher than this. Or I think maybe more effectively, like we were getting at earlier, student loan, whether a school is allowed to utilize federal student loans and federal student aid should be based on performance metrics that the school actually has. Like you were saying earlier, if their first semester dropout rates are above like 25%, they just shouldn't be allowed to use them.
So for that, you know what's crazy? I imagine that this is way worse now. But my freshman year, maybe it was sophomore, but definitely my freshman as well, I remember people so the dorms are meant for 2 people. They had 4, in some cases up to 8 in bunk beds. And of course, by the end of the semester, like, they're down to 2. Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Either because they moved around, not necessarily all dropped out, to be fair. Some had just been moved to other dorms to fill the rooms that had now open spaces from the people who dropped out.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as controlling the costs of higher education, I think probably one of the best ways to do it is tying federal funding to observable, objective metrics.
Yeah, performance, KPIs.
And if your school is not achieving them, you don't get funding. You know, it's just like a market. Like, if your business sucks, it's not delivering a good product, you go out of business.
Should a university be able to just, I don't know, abstractly set the cost of the education?
What do you mean?
Because, like, don't you think that, okay,
you mean like, should there be
if someone's going
to
college to be a fucking YouTuber or you know, to be an actor or celebrity kind of crap, right? These let's just call it pipe dreams, right? Or go into masters of dance and I don't want to say music because but even music, you know, like, shouldn't those be higher? These less employable fields, shouldn't the cost of education be higher for those than, say, engineering or medical school? You know,
these are means of encouraging people to go a certain direction.
Not just that, but out of fairness.
Well,
okay,
I think if we're trying to be fair, it should actually be the other way around.
I think scholarship distribution.
Because you don't need to go to college to learn music. Go on YouTube.
Scholarship distribution should be, in my opinion, a little more granular. So it's like
scholarships are private mostly.
What about the states?
Not necessarily.
State scholarships. So like,
at least in Arizona,
there
there's
are
pretty extensive
let's just say I get
state scholarships.
If I get the presidential provost or AIM scholarship,
okay,
I do think, to your point, it would be interesting to see a reduction in what I'm given if I decide to go learn Chinese.
Well, and
versus getting the full.
Well, that's kind of. I wasn't saying about Chinese.
I'm just being like ridiculous.
Translators are still a high demand.
I'm being
career.
ridiculous, but yes, but you know what I mean. Like,
if you're talking about costs proportionally, like the cost to the school to run a music program is probably actually much less
lower
than to run a
recurring
computer
costs.
science program.
But
So to be fair in that sense, those degrees should be cheaper. And
But
the engineering
which has the
degree should
most
be more
industry
expensive.
demand?
Well, that's what I'm saying is you're talking about using it as a means of pushing people in a certain direction, as an incentive.
Not even just that, just as a way not to discourage people to be doctors.
Exactly, as an
nurses.
incentive. That's what I'm using it as an incentive.
and you're still supporting your school inadvertently. I don't know, like what the ethics behind it, but I kind of like the idea of a STEM tax. For
STEM what?
tax.
I don't know how I don't.
You know what I'm talking about? No, I'm kidding, but like a reduction in the scholarship for students that are essentially like pursuing these
These useless degrees.
This is so
That's so fucked up, dude.
I know.
Wow.
I'm like all for it. It's so fucked up.
Well, I'm pretty sure most parents would be for something like that. You know, like, because they don't want their kids to, they don't want to pay for their kid. No parent wants to pay for their kid's education if they're just going to study YouTube.
Another thing too, by the way, is on that whole KPI argument that we brought up, ASU could hypothetically, and it's kind of tied back to this argument, hear me out here, ASU could hypothetically thrive on the inflated performance, assuming they just increase their admission standards and keep the quality of education the same. They would ensure like adequate or efficient funding from the state, because they're getting better students that are less inclined to drop out. But if you keep the education and like essentially like the standards of education low, like the retention rates may not drop. And then if you get like whatever funding due to like this inflation of like performance, if you will, like on paper, you might not feed it back into the quality of education.
Well, there's an accrediting board for colleges,
because
which is supposed to be independent from them. I don't know to what extent it actually is. So in order for this to work, that board would have to be completely independent from colleges and would have to assess them objectively on the quality of their curriculum.
Yeah, I definitely
How would they assess the quality
Yes.
of a curriculum if they're not an expert in the curriculum?
Well, I'm very curious how that works.
They'd have to. I think it would make sense for that to at that level be hiring industry consultants.
The reason I
I was
asked
gonna
that
say,
is
yeah.
like, so my advisory board helps approve the curriculum, but they don't necessarily go through all of it.
Well, I think you can also,
which is a problem, because
also
what I came on
evaluate-
is like the stuff for like React, the last sections and stuff weren't fully built out in a way that would be like even acceptable for like a
Accessible.
basic
yeah.
introductory like Udemy course.
Uh-huh.
So it was like, how was this vetted?
Well, it has to be vetted somehow. I don't know
And it
the
was
answer
vetted.
to the
Well,
question.
so how it was vetted in this case, it sounds like, and I could be wrong, is like they just trust the instructor as an subject matter quote unquote expert. It's like, wait a second. You know what I mean?
It's putting faith in their hiring process at that point. You know?
Yeah.
I'm saying that in order for this to work, there has to be some kind of accreditation that's accurate
And
and is
removed.
done properly and is
Yeah.
completely independent
And I
from the
agree.
schools.
Yes.
And I don't really know the specifics of how that
I
would
don't know how
be
that-
done,
how
but
that
it would
functionally
be a
works.
requirement.
Yeah, I was
for it to
curious
work.
about that whole like.
Because otherwise, it would just
So,
snowball the
as
same
a more
effect that we've had, which is
concrete
lowering
way-
of standards.
That's what I was getting at.
yeah.
What as a more concrete way, so like I just had to learn how to do like actual lesson plans and unit plans, which I never even know about because I didn't go to school for education, right? I'm an applied sociology major. I didn't even go to school for this field. I learned that and just worked in the field, and I got hired as an industry expert, right? So potentially the same problems can arise. But one way to answer the question of how I think is requiring lesson plans or unit plans for everything that you're proposing for the curriculum, so that even if you're not an expert in that field, an educator who knows how to read a lesson plan and unit plan can say, okay, I like how they're structuring this. I like how they're planning this out for the student, and if they are, and then it's okay to be like, okay, I have faith in the hiring process of the instructor, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I
In
think that
theory,
makes
at
sense.
least.
In theory, sure. Well, we are at an hour and 40 some minutes. So I think this is probably a good place to end this conversation.
Did you have any thoughts on that though, Alex?
No, I like the idea. Also, this has been a very enjoyable conversation,
Yeah, this is a really good one.
by the way. And I cannot believe we spoke for that long. It didn't feel like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's all one topic too.
Yeah.
I know. I was a little bit on games too.
Yeah.
Well,
Wavy,
but even that was an
wavy.
analogy to the original.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It wasn't
Oscillated in and out
wasn't
of
its
the
own.
same.
So that's a little different for us. Is usually this podcast goes through a few different topics.
Deliberately incoherent, usually.
Yeah.
It's a psychedelic journey.
Oh
Yeah.
God, I could have students listening. I want to edit that out. Please, no angry parent calls, please.
Oh, this was also a totally clean podcast too, wasn't it?
I think I did cuss that one.
I did too.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh.
But like we could probably count the
Whatever.
number
We're
of-
adults. We're
with-
allowed to cuss.
On one hand.
It's
No,
not-
like I don't care. It's fine with me. It was curious because there's a switch whether when I upload it, whether it's clean or explicit. I was like, could I actually hit clean this time? Like,
Right.
yeah,
I think you could, and most people wouldn't catch it.
yeah.
Did he tell you? I was joking with him when he invited me over, and I was like, how did I word it? Because I curse. I teach sailors how to curse. Like it's. I'm so
Seriously?
No, of course not.
Okay, I'm gonna say I can't see that.
So he messaged me that I was like, I'd love to, but you'd have to spend a lot of time editing out my profanity.
Oh yeah, that's
He's
right.
like,
Oh, okay.
profanity is okay. I don't edit that. I'm like, I'm a teacher now, and they will hunt down. I didn't add down, but they will hunt down your podcast. Like,
Right.
they're weird like that. They found my Twitter like the first few days. I'm like,
Yeah. Well, this was definitely a good conversation. I imagine we'll probably do this again. Actually, there's a lot more to
Yeah,
talk
pleasure
about.
having you.
yeah,
Yeah, it was a great
fun
time.
being here.
Thanks for being here.
It's
Brett,
great to be away
Hans.
from the baby.
Yeah. So yeah, till next week. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of SpyFy After Dark. If you enjoyed it, maybe consider rating or subscribing on whatever platform you're listening on. We'd really appreciate it. Next week is the final episode of Season 1 of this podcast, and I'll be talking with my friend Chris about movies and a little bit of a recap on most of the season. We recorded it a little early, so it didn't include a recap of this episode and the last episode with Alex, but more or less a recap of the season. And as always, if you want to stay on top of it, you can follow me on Twitter at MillanTweets, that's MILLAN tweets, to learn when new episodes come out. Thanks again. See you next week.